Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, Open Water. As a chef and restaurant owner, I know how important it is not only to serve amazing food, but also take care of our planet. Open Water makes that easy with their eco-friendly bottled water packaged in 100% recyclable aluminum bottles, helping to reduce the plastic waste. What's even cooler? Open Water is a female-owned company leading the way in sustainability, something we can all get behind. And here's the best part. They're giving our listeners 20% off. Just use promo code INTHEWEEDS at checkout. So whether you're hydrating your team or stocking up for your restaurant, make the switch to Open Water. Delicious water, a healthier planet, and great discount. Cheers to that. All right, I'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Saltwerk. You can check them out at saltwerk.com. You ever wonder what a pinch of Iceland would taste like? Well, you have it now in the most sustainable, flaky sea salt in the world. I've actually traveled to Iceland. Their geothermal powered island is beautiful. There's just a sense of freshness in the air over there, and it translates to this salt. I love this salt. It's delicious. It's the most sustainable. Again, you can buy just the normal flaky sea salt, but they also have infused salts, which I've been using at home lately a lot. They have this birch smoked sea salt that I love using with seafood. They have the lava salt, which is super black and cool looking. It's got a certain different type of taste to it. They have the Arctic thyme salt, which I use for my pickling liquids. And again, guys, just don't think of salt as something to season post recipe. You can use all these salts in the recipe alone. At We The Pizza, we use their flaky sea salt in our dough preparation. And they have this seaweed salt that I just used at an event that I loved at the Indy 500. I made a plant-based crab cake, and I was looking for a little bit more of that ocean flavor. Guess what I used? Saltwerk's seaweed salt. Gave me just that ocean flavor that I needed for my plant-based crab cake. It was a hit. Guys, if you want to use my promo code, you can. It's at In The Weeds Pod. You can use it on their website. You'll get a 20% discount on all their items. Stock up. This salt is amazing. And again, it is powered 100% by geothermal energy, the most sustainable sea salt on the market. You're welcome. Get yours. No Salt Bay in the house, just Saltwerk. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the In the Weeds podcast, where we dive deep into the craziness of the restaurant industry and so much more. We discuss food, beverage, even food policy issues. Basically, if you love to eat, drink, and are curious about this industry, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Spike Mendelsohn, a recovering celebrity chef, a long-life restaurant rat, from washing dishes in my family's business to cooking at Michelin star restaurants, competing in reality cooking competitions, and serving as an advocate for food policy issues. My life is always in the weeds. We're broadcasting live from the District of Columbia, our nation's capital, and on today's episode, we have a very special guest, so special that we wrote a little song for him. All right. What's up, Seth? How we doing?
I'm good. I've never had a special song.
I mean, listen, Seth. First of all, I'm a little nervous because you do this all the time.
That's true.
You do songs, you do limericks, you do all the things. I'm gonna totally botch this. What it is Fink likes to surprise me with an intro all the time. So he wrote a song and I'm just going in blindly here. So let's see. So it's in the tune of "I'm Just Ken." Do you know that song?
I'm Just Ken. Yes, from Barbie.
You do know that song.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, It's my first time hearing the thing. So here we go. We're going to. He's just Seth. Our guest today needs no introduction. Honestly, he's bigger than Sir Thompson Lipton and the Snapple lady. Can't you see? 21st century Ben Franklin of the tea industry. I'm so awful right on this. He created a drink that inspired a wave. He's been called the biggest revolution since the party in Boston paved the way. He's just Seth, promoting friendly planet foods from Bethesda to Mozambique, always having time to exercise, yeah. Beyond the world of tea, he's an innovative and pragmatic leader, you see. Some may call him George Washington Carver. Meets George Lucas and a sprinkle of Julia Child, indeed. I feel like I'm turning this into a rap, Jason. Now our guest is eating the change with positive intent and positive deeds. He's eating the change, yeah? Beyond meat, honest tea, just iced tea. He's changing the world for you and me. Sustainability is more than just a dream. With Seth, it's a friendly planet, friendly scheme. He's just Seth, promoting friendly planet foods from Bethesda to Mozambique. Always having time to exercise. He's just Seth. Beyond meat and honesty, he's leading the change with positivity, yeah.
Thank you.
He's just Seth. But he's just
overwhelmed.
So much more, you see. I know. We'll send you this. You'll sing it out better for me. Seth, welcome to the In the Weeds podcast.
Thank you, Spike.
Yes, and for those out there listening, which I'm sure there's a lot of, Seth is, we are co-founders, actually. We've been co-founders at least for the last 5 years.
Times two.
Yeah, times two. Obviously, you guys are familiar with Just Iced Tea. We drink it on this podcast a lot. They are sponsor, not sponsor of this podcast. And we always talk about, the beautiful tea. So Seth, Seth, it's a pleasure to have you.
It's great to be. I'm going to pop a cap right now.
Why don't you pop the cap and read the label? We could,
put my glasses off for that.
Yeah, let's. So it's exciting to have Seth on the podcast today because, we work in the same office. We're on the same mission here with Just Iced Tea as well as Plant Burger. We'll learn all about that. But, we have him captivated in a room right now. So Seth,
this is actually so first of all, the source here is, actually, I'm not sure, Epictetus. It says, difficulties are things that show a person what they are.
Ooh,
I like that.
Wow.
Relate to that.
Yeah. So Seth, tell us. So, we always like to dive, we've listened to a lot of your podcasts. Jason spent, 40 hours on you this week.
Like 60 of your TED Talks.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
Got a big Seth fan.
That's a deep dive.
We got a deep dive in here. But, we want to, what I'd love to know is I want to go back to the beginning a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Did you ever, you've obviously are having a fantastic education. I want to hear about that. But where are you from? Where was your upbringing a little bit?
I grew up in Wellesley, Massachusetts. My parents were both professors. So my dad was a professor at Wellesley College, my mom at Boston University.
Yeah.
And it was a very information intensive household. There was radio was always on, but it was always news.
Yeah.
First it was CBS Radio, then it was NPR. There were 3 newspapers delivered to the house each day. So you had the New York Times, Boston Globe, Wall Street Journal, and they read every. They didn't read the sports section, but every other part of the paper they would read, and they'd make one would make a slash this way, one would make a slash the other way. So when it was an X, that meant it was time to take it out for recycling. But and it was a backlog.
Once the newspapers were done, it was
but every page had to be read.
Yeah.
And so if they traveled, there'd be the stack of newspapers, and they didn't just say, they would go back and read all.
Yeah. And did they have you read some of these too, or were you kind of like, what's going on?
It was more just the vibe was
the vibe was
a lot
just
of information, a lot of knowledge, emphasis on that. Dinner table was talk not about sports teams or weather. It was about the world and
there was how many siblings?
3 siblings. So it was 4 of us. I was the youngest of 4.
You were you're the youngest of 4. Wow.
So I got a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Which was very nice. And and I think the other thing is there was definitely an expectation about that, you're expected to do something in the world, not just sort of pass through.
Yeah.
And I internalized that thinking I was going to go into politics. So I was, president of my school or student council, all of that stuff. And I guess I thought and growing up in Massachusetts, it's a very political state. So you had the Kennedys there, you had Mike Dukakis, and I actually was an intern for Mike Dukakis. Then I worked on his campaign when he ran for president. So I thought that was kind of the path
So full of, so you were exposed to a lot of that at an early age, but you're also a sports guy though. So I want to know how that eventually you actually fell in. So what was the Goldman household like when you were younger? Like what, was the family plant-based at that point?
No.
What were your favorite foods? Like what were you eating?
It was a very uncreative food household. My mom was a professor, and so there was not an emphasis on food. So, she definitely did make dinner, but it was off. I would say it was out of a can, but it was not it was not a culinary experience.
Sure.
She in fact, even until in her 80s, she had a little plaque that someone gave her, but she put it on the wall because it represented her worldview. Was life is too short to stuff a mushroom.
Hey, listen, I've stuffed a lot of mushrooms in my life, Seth. I know all about that. That resonates with me.
I enjoyed eating food, but it was we used to say eating for quantity, not quality.
Sure.
So
for sustenance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think I was a little bit of within our household, I was a little bit of a rebel because I wasn't as academically inclined, which I know sounds weird because I went to Harvard.
Absolutely.
But I was the one who would go out. My mother used to call me in a somewhat teasing way, the playboy of the Western world, because if there was a chance to go out and play, I would go out and play. And so I had a neighbor across the street, and he was closer in age to me than actually my siblings, and so he and I would always be doing sports, whether it was wiffle ball or football in the street, where we were always getting kicked off by Mrs. Ewing, just like always being
like Mrs. Ewing, like
the neighbor. She didn't like
yeah.
us. We played with a Nerf football, but she didn't like. She was worried her car, her VW, was going to get damaged by the Nerf football.
Totally.
And so it was always this tension we had. When we got to that part of the field in the street, that was
So you were out on the block, you running around the street doing your thing.
That stuff.
And so did your
So I had a lot of energy.
Yeah, a lot of energy. Yeah.
And looking for outlets for it. And I think if I sort of look at my childhood, the thing more than anything that resembles what I do now is that I was multitasking.
Yeah.
So I was doing a lot of sports, but I also did music. I took, was piano. I did different teams. So there was always I was up to a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So speaking of which, so that's interesting. So you were out. You rather be out and hanging out
and reading. My siblings were much better readers than I was.
Yeah.
And I literally, my mom would have a requirement that when I came home, I had to read for 30 minutes before I could do anything.
Yes.
And it was definitely and my friend, she was okay with me reading junky books like Alfred Hitchcock books or whatever, but it was still like that was a requirement, and because I wasn't naturally drawn to it, and I'm totally appreciative that my mom and my dad emphasize that because
sure. I'm doing the same thing with Ace right now.
Yeah.
I try to get him to read as much as he can. So Seth, all right. So then were your siblings taking, what were their paths? Similar to you,
my brother he actually served in the Army, and then went to business school and was a CFO. My older sister became a doctor, family practice, and then the next sister, the younger sister, still older than me, became a professor.
Yeah. And how many years are you apart from the youngest?
So she's 5 years older than me. So and my brother's 10 years older than me.
Okay. So they were all going to college before you and all doing that stuff.
Yeah.
So then when did you turn on this idea of wanting to go to Harvard, I guess?
Yeah. I think there was kind of an expectation there.
Okay.
That I was going to, so my brother went to University of Pennsylvania. My two sisters went to Yale. It was definitely a high expectation household. I from high school just applied to a bunch of schools and got into Harvard, so that worked.
So you were doing really good in high school, obviously.
I would say I was doing good enough. I was, again, for me, I think when I think about my high school experience, obviously I did academics, but I was president of the school. I was on the wrestling team, on the track team. I was in the musical. I was in the singing
multitasking.
Exactly. So that's the multitasking.
Yeah.
And that probably more. And I had founded the debate team. So more than anything, that was like the thing that defined me.
Sure.
Was just doing all those, doing lots of different tasks at once, being able to focus enough. And I wasn't, by the way, excellent on any one of them.
Sure.
But I was doing them well enough. And I think that kind of translates here too, as an entrepreneur, you have to do it, you have to be able to have, whether it's marketing, accounting, or operations, you got to sort of be exposed to all of them. And I think probably the other thing that has helped in my work is just being able to deal with people.
Yeah.
And of course, doing all those different activities, whether you're on a team, you're in a singing group, you have to deal with group dynamics and all those things as well.
And wrestling is a serious sport.
It's
that
intense.
that takes a lot.
That's very personal because there it's just you, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that I got out of wrestling was just being resilient, because I was definitely not a good wrestler. My sophomore year, which was the first year I wrestled, I was 1-12. And the 1 was when somebody didn't show up, so I got the forfeit. What you learn from that is being, I don't say humiliated, but being defeated.
Yes.
And being able to bounce back and try to find, how do you say, okay, what's the reason to believe that you can do better?
Sure, absolutely.
And to be resilient and not give up. And that's another quality that really, comes to work here.
Well, I love that. So I love that how you were getting involved with so many different things and the musical part.
Yeah.
That was another piece that you loved. So you play the piano?
I did the piano. Not excellent.
Sure,
but then
you saw my song right now. Like it's the worst thing ever. I can't hold the beat if my life depended on it.
But then I got into there was an a cappella group in our high school, and I did that in college too. And then, different musicals in high school and then in college as well. And again, that's performing and just being able to sort of be creative.
Yeah.
I did some poetry. I took some poetry courses, poetry writing courses, which again is just a fun, way to sort of think about words and language.
Nice little outlet, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you were president of the high school.
Yeah.
Did you run your own campaign kind of thing?
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, it was basically you sort of, you give a speech and press the flesh.
So a lot of exposure in high school, especially at the home front. And then and there was an expectation, you said, about going to a big school. So did you pick Harvard, or did you pick a couple others?
I picked a few others. Harvard, it was sort of the first one I got into, and it was.
How do you apply to Harvard? Like
standard,
standard, really? Yeah,
regular application. Yeah, and I actually got waitlisted at Yale, so I'm like, all right, well, Harvard said yes, I'll go there.
Go there.
Yeah.
Is there the thing in like Yale, Harvard kind of? Is it competitive? Those two schools?
Oh yeah, I mean they're competitive to get into.
Yeah,
but
and do do the Yale people are like, oh, you went to Harvard?
Everybody's got their own little superiority complex.
But you had siblings that went to Yale, though, right?
I don't really get into it.
Yeah.
They get to look down on each other, and
it's not like they play each other in sports or spelling
They
bees.
do.
Oh, they do.
There's like some. Harvard used to have this shirt that said Yale ? And then on the back it says, "Don't they make locks or something?" There's all that stuff. I was sort of intentionally not into that.
Yeah. And so what was that? Was that a 4-year experience?
Yeah. And I majored in government, again, sort of thinking that was my path. And I had a great time.
What was drawing you to politics and government?
So always feeling like, again, that expectation that, the world needs some help and fixing, and is there something I can do? And elected office would be, at the time, my assumption was elected office would be the way to make change happen. So seeing imbalances in economic opportunity and getting elected could help, be a way to address that, or seeing what was going on with the environment even early on. Okay, if you care about that, then the government's the way to affect that. And so I had, especially because of my parents, the upbringing, I wasn't exposed that much to business.
Sure.
And so didn't have at that time a lens to understand that business can be a vehicle for change as well.
Right. And I want to get into that because I love the crossover. But were there like certain moments, when you were in college that were driving you like, hey, I need to change the world from a political stance? Like, was there like a certain war that was happening, or a certain moment in history, or like?
Well, you had the whole apartheid in South Africa situation. So,
yeah.
And I wasn't involved in those protests, but clearly felt like, it's obviously it's not right that a country and a society can live like that, and feeling like. That's an example of the kind of thing, but also just even in the United States, just understanding the imbalances in economic opportunity and how do we evolve society so that we can do better. And there was as a government major, I took there's some good philosophy courses, and there was this whole book by John Rawls who created this whole theory about what would society be like how would you design a society where you didn't know what your standing would be in that society before it's designed.
Yes.
Right. So you have to create it, and so.
That's interesting.
And then all of a sudden you find out, oh well, I'm.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that really spoke to me about that, and it was an idea that was just getting started, was this idea that there should be a national service opportunity in addition to the military. Where people could use that as a vehicle to gain access to economic opportunity, but also to serve. And that was something I actually got involved in after college as well. And City Year, which was one of the first first parts of AmeriCorps, was just getting started at that time. And
so was that your first thing, like after college, basically?
I started. It turns out that the founders of City Year, I actually knew. One of them was a tutor of mine at Harvard. Like when you take a government class, then you do a breakout, and then there's a tutor who you work with. So I got to know the founders, and after college, right after college, I traveled. I spent a year in China. I spent a year and a half in Russia. But then as I came back and sort of circled back on it, I worked on the campaign. I worked on the Dukakis campaign, as I mentioned. Then I ended up working for Dukakis' running mate, Lloyd Benson. So I worked on Capitol Hill as a press secretary. But from there, then I went and worked in AmeriCorps. What was before it became AmeriCorps.
So were you, when you were on the campaign trail, is that safe to say? Or were you in a suit and tie and things like that?
I was,
jackets?
So my job was to be the advance person for Benson. I would go to the city he was headed to.
Yeah.
And I would go and make sure that he, the press, in particular, the press was ready. Like, where's the press conference going to be? Inviting the reporters. Hey, we're going to do an event here and there, and so of course it's as we sort of in election season, I look at those events with a little bit of a different lens.
Definitely, right? Yeah.
What's the backdrop? What's the camera shot that we're going to want out of this? What's the message we're going to want out of this?
Oh, so very strategic stuff.
Yeah.
I love that. So, I mean, because I only ask Seth that, guys, because I know you won't catch him in a suit these days or tie. It won't happen. I
still have those suits that I wore from and in fact, a lot of those suits from my dad's old suits.
Oh, really? I love that. Jay, were you going to say something?
No, I used to do advance work.
Oh, you used to do for the mayors?
Obama.
The mayor, and then Obama, Secretary of Interior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. It's exciting. It's very tiring.
Yeah, it is. So that's where I met Julie, my wife.
That's right.
So we were both doing advance work in Longview, Texas, which is in East Texas, and that was
Texas.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Doing that advance work was great. Again, and that's being entrepreneurial, right? You got to multitask. You got to move quickly. You're going into an area where you don't have many resources or no people.
Yeah,
and you make that happen.
Yeah, and then you jump to the next one.
Yeah, and then exactly. As soon as they say wheels up, once the wheels are up, you head over to the next one.
So how long was your political career for?
Yeah, so the advance work was only for like 3 months leading to the election. But then after as I said, I traveled, and after I came back from Moscow after having spent a year and a half there, then I worked for Benson for 2.5 years on Capitol Hill in the Senate.
And so then, all right. So then I want to hear about like what was did you have you had some entrepreneurial background, you were doing the political thing, but then what was the crossover to get into the private sector? What was the moment? Yeah. Was it like, I'm just so tired of this stuff, I want to take matters in my own hands?
I enjoyed the work with Benson, and someone at his level, like, really was having a great impact. And I traveled with Benson as his press secretary, traveled around Texas to a bunch of cities, got to see his policies, sort of the benefit of those. I thought, okay, this is great. This is a guy at a very high level. He'd just been, he'd served in the Senate for 20 years, plus he'd been a vice presidential candidate, so he's having an impact. There's a chance I might run and get to that level, but, no guarantee. And even then, I saw how there was still so much compromise required in the work. Yeah. And I'm like, what's a way to get more directly involved? And so right around that time, AmeriCorps was building, as I mentioned, this idea with City Year, and I I took a job helping to launch a version of a national service program in Baltimore. So I ran in particular a pilot. So Clinton just got elected and they had wanted to do a pilot program. So it was called the Summer of Service, which was to demonstrate that this could work nationally. I ran the program in Baltimore, which was wonderful. 50 young people worked in different service work. And then they had a convening. They brought everyone together into California, all the programs from all around the country. And for me, this was a great example of, okay, I'm directly affecting these 50 people. I see their work in the community, so I'm having an impact on them. They're having an impact direct that's easy to see. So I thought this is really
it's like tangible.
It's very tangible.
Yeah.
But when we went to Treasure Island in California for this convening, I saw programs from all around the country and so much passion, but also so much confusion. Like people who were really idealistic, but I would say didn't necessarily have the management skills to make those ideas a reality. And I thought, man, if this movement's going to scale, that we're going to need people with management skills.
Yeah,
that could really do it. And I applied to business school, and then I actually at the same time had been talking to City Year, and I got an offer from them to go run a program in Pittsburgh. And so I got to this point, do I go to Pittsburgh and run this program, or do I go to business school? And that's when I went to business school.
Yes.
It was
where was business school?
Yale School of Management.
Oh, so you ended up doing both. There, yeah.
So Yale School of Management, and that's where at Yale, the first case study we picked up was called Rainforest Crunch, and it was a story about a Ben and Jerry's spinoff. So Ben and Jerry's, the ice cream company, there was an effort to try to create a mission-driven enterprise where they would use the harvest from the rainforest, nuts, to make candies and things, and the business failed. But it still sort of awoke in me this curiosity. So you could use business to do positive things.
And that was one SKU.
It was a case study around one. It was a whole company. It was a spin-off from Ben and Jerry's. So it wasn't the Ben and Jerry's company, but it was inspired by Ben and Jerry's and some of the people. But it failed. And I think it was a case of probably where the mission may have made sense, the business didn't make sense. But what happened as they scaled, their supply chain didn't work anyway. It wasn't for me. It wasn't about that the business failed. That was exciting. It was more that I could understand how you could use the private sector to address public needs.
So that light bulb went off. Right. And so was it? After that happened, was it like an immediate urge to figure out like that thing for you, or was it or you slept on like
curiosity? I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And then so this was in 1993. In the fall of 1993, there was the first gathering of something that became known as Net Impact. At the time, it was called Students for Responsible Business. So it was a group of business school students who wanted to pursue careers in the field of socially responsible business, and they had created internships with a certain group of employers who wanted to help support this. And so I got involved in Net Impact because I thought that's my wheelhouse. So I actually became a founding board member there, and I got an internship with a company called Calvert, which is based in Bethesda. That was the leader. In fact, going back to what we said about apartheid, Calvert was the first mutual fund company to divest their portfolio from any companies doing business in South Africa. And they're still around? They're still around. They're not in Bethesda anymore. They got bought by Eaton Vance.
Got it.
So based up in Boston. But I got my internship there, and that I would say sort of set me on that path.
And so you're at Yale for business school.
2 years.
2 years. How many classes are you like? How many? So
full load.
So then, when does Barry come to? And Barry, just to let you guys know, is a co-founder of Honesty. We'll get to that in a sec. But yeah. So how? You know?
So it was really in the second year of business school that I started. Because first year you're doing the core courses. Second year I started to do more specific courses, and in the fall, I took a course on political and economic marketing, which Barry Nalebuff, who's an economics professor, was a teacher of, along with a guy named Lenny Stern, who runs the strategic public communications. And so, having worked in campaigns, that was kind of my wheelhouse. So, I knew what I was doing. I could, and it turns out during, obviously diversion here, but there was a governor's race going on in Connecticut at the time. And I remember I came up with like a great sort of campaign message for, I don't think the guy took it. A guy named Bill Curry was running for governor. And I specifically asked him, I met him and said, what is your, what defines you? How would you distinguish yourself from others personally? What's your personal quality? He says, I feel like I've had courage to take stances on things. And I came up with this slogan, Bill Curry, courage, period, for a change.
For change.
So like courage, you could read it both ways. Courage for a change, and courage for a change because everyone else is spineless.
No, I love that. Yeah.
So.
And they didn't use it.
It was the last week of the campaign when I came up with it, but it was still good.
Got it. Did he win?
He lost.
He should have. This is Seth. You could have changed history with this.
Anyway, so Barry was like, that's brilliant. And so we developed a nice connection. And then in the spring, I took Barry's competitive strategy course.
Oh, okay. So you took his first course and you're
fall.
like, and so what do you think about like seeing as a student being in his class, were you like this? Because I know Barry now and it's just he's a wild man, very interesting, very multi-layered, just to say the least.
Yeah.
But as a student, were you enthralled by it?
So he had a reputation as a tough, hard-ass professor because he would cold call people. And, there would be occasions, and this didn't happen when I was in the room, but there were occasions where he would cold call somebody, ask him a question, and it was clear the person hadn't read the case study.
Yeah.
But he would keep asking that same person
the
questions rather than just like let him go. And so there were, I've heard that tears were shed. I think he's mellowed a bit since then.
Yeah, still professor.
Still
right?
professor.
Still doing it.
But super creative and high expect. So I think it was also helpful because my parents were professors. I was used to both the high expectations and the mindset, and I think if you don't have professors in your life, it's very easy to be intimidated by professors, and I wasn't intimidated.
I equate it to like chef mentors that I've worked with, my style of a professor, right? It's like, you kind of need them, right? And
but they're tough. They can be tough.
And they can be tough. And they reminded me of my parents, like in the restaurant industry in a way. So that's an interesting connection.
Yeah.
So the second course was?
So the second course was competitive strategy.
Competitive strategy.
And then we were looking at every case studies, everything from diapers, which I sort of did a little entrepreneurial venture around that, to what ultimately brought us together for the long term, which was the Cola Wars.
Yeah.
This was a case study about Coke versus Pepsi. And the case study was basically about how do these two companies try to sell more brown fizzy liquid than the other.
Yeah.
And so Barry's like, okay, one's got Michael Jackson, one is doing,
I don't know. I'd never heard of this. This is interesting to me. So it started. There was you did a case study between these companies. Wow.
Yeah. And it was a very, there was the whole, the different CEOs. It was a big part of American culture. So there's the Pepsi taste test.
Sure.
And Pepsi for a time was really the ascendant brand. Roger Enrico, the CEO of Pepsi, had a lot of good. As I said, they had Michael Jackson, Super Bowl ads, all this stuff. And Barry's question during the case study was, well, okay, we can talk about different marketing strategies for selling fizzy brown liquids, but aren't there other ways these brands can compete? And my hand went, what about the fact that everything is so sweet? No one's selling anything with like a different sweetness profile. And Barry was really, he agreed with that idea that there should be that approach. And he said, look, we could make some samples, we could do some focus groups. And this was my second year of business school. So I like the idea, but like, I got to go find a job. I got my wife and I have two sons. We are, planning to move back to the DC area because that's where Julie lives. So let's,
So you're still in Boston.
This is New Haven.
New Haven with two
sons.
Jonah and
Ellie had just been born. And so, like, it was not the time for me to go try to launch a beverage company.
Definitely, yeah.
But obviously, the idea stuck with me, and then I did move down to Bethesda, worked for Calvert, and about 2.5 years in was when I started to get the entrepreneur again. So Calvert was a mutual fund company doing investing, and it was positive in the sense that we could help people direct their money towards things they cared about, and that I felt good about. But going back to my time in the Senate, just a few steps removed, right? So it's really, you're not having a direct impact. You're helping people put money where their values are, but it's by investing in companies that do things. So it felt, again, a little removed from the kind of direct impact I wanted to have. And so that was kind of like, what could I do that is more in the action? And by the way, just investments in general, which probably as they should be, or just conservative companies, even a Calvert.
Yeah.
It's a mutual fund company, so it's not as dynamic a workplace as.
Is the case study? Is that in the book?
Yeah, Harvard Business School case study. Yeah.
It was it's in your book that you wrote with Barry. Is it, or did you guys?
We reference it.
You reference it because it's boggling my mind. I didn't even know about that case study. I was listening to Business Wars, Coke versus Pepsi. I was telling Seth about it. I was like, you got to listen. He did the case study himself like years ago.
Yeah,
but it was interesting.
And I lived it. When I was part of Coca-Cola, so I got to see how these guys
how they
interact.
all did it. Well, that's so okay. So then samples came about.
Then what happened was I worked for Calvert for 2.5 years, and I was enjoying it, but I was getting that entrepreneurial itch. It was great, just by the way, just like a great place to go from business school to get private sector experience.
Yeah.
Move my family to Bethesda, and I'm still friendly with the founders of it. But yeah, I was trying to think about what else can I do, and I went up to New York for Calvert to give a presentation to a institutional investor conference on socially responsible investing.
Yeah.
It was fine, but it definitely stuffy shirt type of thing.
Sure.
And so after the presentation, I went for a run in Central Park.
Yeah.
After the run in Central Park, I was thirsty, and I went to just one of the bodega, the kind of shops we go into all the time in New York, and I looked in the cooler, and there was lots of product on the shelf, but nothing that spoke to me.
Yeah.
And so then I said, wait a minute, and I recalled my conversation with Barry. I said, maybe this is the time I should do something about this. So I emailed Barry and I said, remember that conversation? I think I am actually ready to do something about this now.
Yeah.
And Barry had just come back from India. He had gone there to do a case study of the tea industry.
Yeah.
And among the insights, he had a few insights. One insight he had was just that he went to a tea auction and he saw sort of the highest quality tea sell at a particular price, and then another price, the broken orange Pico and the tippy golden orange Pico, and the dregs, the leftover stuff was just sold off, and that was what was sold to companies like Snapple to make iced tea sold in America. She was like, they're using the lowest quality.
The lowest
tea.
quality.
And so he says, what if you made iced tea with the highest quality tea?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like, all right, just a paradigm shift, because it would still cost you pennies a bottle.
Sure.
If you did that with wine, you'd be charging hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
But with tea, the difference between the best tea and the least tea is pennies.
It's pennies, yeah.
But the taste is dramatically better. So that was sort of the first insight. The other one was he, as he will do, he's just got a playful mind, so he's just playing around with names. And he had been asked to consult for Tata, which is a big Indian conglomerate. And they were asking him, how do we approach the American market? And he says, you could, Tata, that name is it's a premium name. You could use that name, but you create an American brand, call it Honest Tea.
Yeah.
And they didn't take his advice.
Yeah.
They ended up going and buying Tetley.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But Barry's like, well, they didn't take my advice. I still got that name. So when I called Barry, he says, and when I reached out to him, just like, hey, I think we can do something around a less sweet beverage. I had actually at the time, when I was a student, we talked about doing like a juice and seltzer kind of line.
Totally.
But when I reached out, I said, do you still have an interest in the juice and seltzer line? He says, actually, I think now I would do tea.
Yeah.
And I've got this name.
Yeah.
And
were you a tea drinker then?
No, it's funny.
Time?
So in business school, I would occasionally buy Snapple.
Yeah.
Peach Snapple tea.
Sure.
And I look back now, I'm like, I don't know how I did that. Like, it's just so sweet.
Yeah.
And I think at the time I knew it was sweet, but it was like, that was sort of.
That's what it was offering. Yeah.
So, and because I had lived in China, so you drink tea in China all the time. When I was there, it was sort of the one safe drink you could, you knew, because the water was heated, so you knew the water wouldn't be dangerous. And so, we had tea all the time. And then in Russia, I spent a year there. And again, tea is the drink.
It's huge there, right?
Yeah,
that was surprising to me.
Yeah. So it's very much the drink of friendship. It's the drink where you sort of share your stories, and so I
all varieties of tea, or just
black. In
predominantly
in Russia,
tea.
it was just all black tea.
Black teas, got it.
But in China, a lot of green tea and some black tea, and I wasn't a tea connoisseur, but I was definitely used to tea.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. So the first name that came about was ended up being the name.
The name was almost it was the name before the product line. It wasn't like I've got an amazing tea.
Sure.
What do I call it?
Yeah.
I got an amazing brand.
Yeah. Sometimes it's sometimes the and so tell me about that. Do you? There's so many things that you look at the success for Honest Tea.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to go with a name first.
Right, to flip it, right? So
yeah.
we were just talking about Poppy as an example, right?
Sure.
So Poppy was a drink before it was called Mother's.
Yes.
It was
that's right. Exactly.
With that before, and then they changed the name to fit the proposition.
Yeah.
But with this, so we knew we wanted something less sweet. And as I said, it could have been a juice and seltzer, but because of the name Honest Tea, we're like, well, that's such a great name. What would that look like? And so tea works so well for this idea of a less sweet drink for many reasons. One is that most tea is actually drunk with no sweetener.
Sure.
The tea drinks that are on the market at the time, going back to 1998, are super sweet, way like loaded with, as basically, in some cases, more than soda, more sugar than soda. Tea, again, high quality tea, if it's less sweet, is going to make a difference. So if you make a less sweet tea, but the tea is crappy, then it's still going to it's not going to taste good. But if you could use high quality tea leaves, that could really make a difference in what you taste. And then tea on its own has healthy properties, the antioxidants, all of that. Tea is natural. It is, in this case, it can be sourced organically. And I think the other interesting insight, which we didn't have in the beginning, but obviously we learned pretty quickly, is that even though tea is enjoyed by cultures all around the world, including some of the wealthiest cultures, it's produced in some of the poorest areas of the world. And so there's an opportunity to create wealth in these communities in a way that is righteous to them, that you can honors them, but no diminishment of enjoyment for the consumer.
Sure.
To do that. So that was we knew there was something there.
Yeah.
Fair trade wasn't a thing at that time.
Right.
So
I was going to ask you, So
fair trade, actually interesting, because I'm friendly with the founder of Fair Trade USA. And they started in 1998, the same time that we started Honest Tea.
The same time,
so
same year.
So it wasn't like he wasn't pitching me at the time.
Yeah. So the name came first. So and then you started to. And then so you knew it was going to be organic right away, or
no? Organic was hardly a thing. There wasn't really much organic tea. There was organic sweetener, so we knew like some organic ingredients was going to be helpful.
Sure,
but we didn't have an organic supply chain. So what we would do is we would go to tea catalogs, sometimes online, but sometimes not online, and just taste lots of different teas.
Yeah.
And we'd send them to each other, like, I got this, this thing called Rote-Grütze, which is a German recipe. You should try that.
Right.
And so he would send me the leaves, or I'd send the leaves, and we'd go back and forth.
Yeah.
And found, started to sort of figure out which ones we liked, which ones thought were not just we liked, that also could work well cold. So, we're often asked, how come you don't do an Earl Grey? Well, Earl Grey can taste nice hot, but when you try it cold, it gets a little soapy.
Sure.
So we went back and forth, and then I started to just go usually during lunch at Calvert, I'd go out and meet somebody, and I'd have a thermos of tea. Yeah. And I'd have I didn't have a label at the time, but I'd just tell them about what I'm trying to do.
Thermos of cold tea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I made in my kitchen. What do you think of this?
And no sweetener at the point,
some sweetener, a little bit. Yeah. But we'd have like a great cinnamon herbal tea, or we'd have a chai.
Yeah. So how proficient were you? I'll get to you in a second. How proficient were you in the understanding of the production of tea at that time? So had you been to a garden yet, for instance? Did you know, it blew my mind, and it's silly because I'm a chef, but it kind of blew my mind that tea came from one plant.
The same plant.
And I didn't understand that the fermentation and the oxidation is what brings it to many different labels. Did you know that?
No, I wasn't there. I basically knew about tea bags, and I also started to get, I had developed I got a tea strainer.
Yeah.
And this is actually funny. This was a great example of how Barry, in a very, very affirming way, pushed me into this. He sent me a tea strainer. Yeah. And then he sent me thermoses. This was just his way.
He kind of had a vision for you a little bit in a way. Yeah.
Because I was, still working at Calvert, so it wasn't like I had taken the leap. But so he was eager to see me explore it, and those were little prods he could that obviously those worked out. Yeah, and so just, I would talk to somebody who had a beer company, or I'd talk to somebody who was the head of marketing at Fresh Fields, a local grocery chain. Just anybody I could talk to who would give me some insight, I'd talk to, and it was just the informational exchange.
Yeah.
But I got enough of a feeling that there was something there that by the time I got to probably just after Thanksgiving, I went to Calvert and said, I'm gonna go leave and launch.
That's a big decision.
It was a big decision.
Yeah, I want to hear what Julie had to say about that in a second. But Jay, yeah.
Oh, I think Spike, you were like alluding to this, is that you didn't have the desire to like hire like a tea chef or like not a mixologist, but like a tea expert.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. So no, it just partially because it was so boots. Like there was nothing to hire. Like where do I hire them from? Like I don't have any money. What do I like?
Yeah.
But as an example, so Barry found this amazing recipe for a chai, cardamom pods, like whole cardamom pods that were split. It was delicious, and we talked to the guy. We tried to say, we want to order more, and he's like, "Well, I only grind it in my backyard on Saturdays."
Yeah.
So we're like, okay. What if we want like 100 pounds? No, I can't do that. So Barry said, "Well, we need to make our own chai recipe." And again, I have, I'm not, as you know, I'm not a chef. Like I have no culinary experience. I'm like, well, how do I do that? I don't know how to do that. Barry said, well, what's so hard? We know the ingredients, right? We know it's cardamom. We know it's ginger. It's cloves. Go to and you're near Baltimore. Baltimore's got a ton of spice companies. The old import place. So I literally found a spice company called Van Spices, and I called up and it just happened that the CEO answered the phone, and I said I need to come there and get some spices, and she said, oh well, come on over. And sure enough, we basically blended together. She gave me all the different ingredients, and she became our supplier. So I actually did make that recipe myself. But one of the benefits of Honest Tea was just it was so simple.
Yeah.
And I'm friendly with the founder of Celestial Seasonings, Mo Siegel, and he made a good point, which he says I don't have a sophisticated palate either.
Yeah.
And it's probably a good thing because you're trying to make a tea that's accessible and approachable for everybody.
Yes, big time.
And rather than focus on the little details that could elevate something, like just make it as center of the road as you can.
Yeah.
And so for Honest Tea, that worked. That
That kind of worked.
Yeah.
Do you have another? No. Okay. Yeah. So all right. So you had to tell Julie you quit your job.
Well, so here's what was funny. So it was a whole thing. Julie was on board.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. She said, I didn't know what you were going to do, but I knew you're going to be, you're not going to just stay at Harvard. You're going to be launching and building your own thing. And actually, I think she was on board when I was going to go launch a city year chapter in Pittsburgh. So it could have so different. And my dad was super on board as well. He despite being a professor, he was always entrepreneurial and like creating conferences and he was on the board of a bank, and so just sort of seeing things grow. He loved that. So he says, I'll invest if you launch something.
And your mom was into it also.
Yeah.
So they're both support from the parents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
that must have meant a lot, though, right?
Great. Yeah. But I remember the conversation with Barry before I went to resign, because we never made any of this tea at scale.
Yeah.
We'd only made it in the kitchen.
Sure.
I didn't know anything about production.
Yeah.
And so I called Barry just to get that last boost of courage. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go resign. I've got my wife and I now have 3 sons.
Yeah.
One of whom is under a year old. But I'm going to leave this, stable job in a, stable field to go launch a tea company where I have no experience.
Sure. And if you're saying it out loud, sounds absolutely
and I said to Barry, I said, are you sure we're going to be able to make it? Make the product, not make the company, but are you sure we'll be able to make the tea? Because what we were trying to do was use tea leaves to make tea. And what I had learned was that most bottled tea, or almost all bottled tea, was made with a concentrate or powder. And one of the reasons we called it Honest Tea was because it was brewed with real tea leaves, which is, is not a light thing to do. So Barry said, Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure we can do it.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. I said, but I said, he said, well, I'm pretty sure we can do it. I said, yeah, but you're not the one leaving your job. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're keeping your job. And then he said, well, I bet if you asked to go on a sabbatical for 3 months to explore this, they'd let you do that. And in retrospect, I think they would have. But, no investor's going to invest on a guy trying something on the side. Yeah. And so I've said I'm either in or I'm not. So I'll take that leap. And I remember calling the founder of Calvert to tell him, and he thought it was a joke. Just
he thought he was like, am I being punked or something?
But obviously it was a leap of faith and a little scary, but
so you had to tell him, no, I'm serious about that. I'm actually doing this.
And it was, it was the right time, even though it wasn't the right time in life from a family perspective, it was the right time in life where I was employable. I mean, obviously it was no guarantee it was going to work out, but it wasn't like I would, my prospects would be dead elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, for young entrepreneurs that have been I'm sure they'd be curious for those that are actually working in a job, maybe have an entrepreneurial spirit, much like you had, that taking that leap is a big decision, right? And so what was the strategy behind funding? What were the early days?
So this is kind of an interesting aspect of it too. And it again, I mentioned my father always being, despite being a professor, being entrepreneurial. He would always invest in make small investments in our name. And so literally my decision time was in the fall of 1997. And I went back to do the research on this. My dad, when I was just about after I was born, or early 70s, had made a investment in a company called Dynatech, invested $1,700 in that in my name.
Yeah.
In the fall of 1997, there was I think it was a management buyout of Dynatech that resulted in me, because it was in my name, getting a check for $50,000. And I kind of felt like that fell from heaven. It was not money I was expecting. Yeah. I'm like, well, okay, so that $50,000 is going to be that's
startup money.
And this is at the time that's enough salary to keep me going for a year.
Yeah.
So I'll make that my investment in Honest Tea. I'll pay myself $50,000 for the year, and that was kind of so that was sort of my seed money. Barry put in money as well. My parents put in money. My sister put in money.
Little friends and family.
Friends and family. Barry's roommates from college. We raised about $500,000 in that fall.
That's a lot of money, though.
Back then. Back then, that was enough to get us up and running. And so that was our startup money.
You parents invest in your kids now. That's a good thing.
Producing the product.
So that's the thing with this kind of business. You do need to put up inventory. Yeah, it gets cost. You have to buy it before you sell it.
Yeah.
So you can't just sort of.
So that was it's interesting because Seth knows I'm a father. I have an 8-year-old, and I've been now just recently looking at let me put a couple grand away somewhere for him in his name somehow. Yeah. And so it was in the stock market. Is that
it was an early stage company. Wow. I think it was like a local one, and obviously a lot of those don't work out.
Sure. So you got to be careful. Yeah.
You got to make sure that, one of the things I still remember when I was starting up Honest Tea was one of the dads, Joe, when I was starting Honest Tea, Joe, our oldest son was in elementary school, just starting. And when the dad said, I'd like to put some of my kids' college money in it, I'm like, oh, no.
Oh, yeah, you're like, good dad.
I'm going to be seeing this guy. This was kindergarten.
Sure.
I'm going to see this guy for 12 years.
Yeah.
If I lose his money, it's going to be a long time. So I think, you want some stable investments for your kids. But, there's some sort of speculative things that obviously a high potential for return, but also... You wouldn't. I don't want to say you wouldn't mind losing because you never want to lose.
Sure, you got to invest what you wouldn't mind losing and make sure it's a long-term play.
But obviously for me that was an incredible gift. That it
all
was
the difference.
As it turns out, that father did invest, and I got to actually speak at his son's graduation.
Oh, really? Oh, I love that.
So it was really fun to say. Well, I'm glad we're both here.
All right. So tell me, how was the first couple? Like, so.
Oh my gosh.
So how did you pick your bottle? How did you pick the quote?
Yeah,
like, how did you?
It was all really hard. I mean,
Yeah.
it was fun, but yeah, just a classic example with the bottle. Barry and I, in our whole brainstorming phase, we'd found this incredibly beautiful square bottle from, I don't know, some French, I almost like a cologne company or something.
Sure.
We're like, oh, wouldn't that be neat to do that?
Yeah.
So I drove up to Zuckerman Honigman, who's this company based that we still work with. It's in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. And I walk in and I tell them all, and by the way, these guys see dozens of entrepreneurs every week who are like, I'm going to be the next one, and here's my vision, and here's what I'm going to do. And so I fit that mold perfectly. I walk in with my square bottle and I say, here's what I want to do. I want a square bottle. I want a label on the front and back so it looks premium.
Yeah.
And I want to launch, this spring. So I'm here in, February of '98 and trying to launch in May. They're like, well, we'll work with you, but if you want a bottle to launch in May, here's what it looks like, and here's the cost. And so I basically had my aspirations were at least put on hold. Yeah. As it turns out, by the time we got to Coca-Cola later, we actually got to a bottle that in a lot of ways looked like what we wanted it to, ultimately, Honest Tea to look like. But for the first 10 years, we were in that standard. This bottle, the standard juice bottle or Snapple bottle, was called Snapple bottle. Even though today's Snapple's not in it.
So just iced tea bottle now.
Exactly. Exactly. That was what was available. So, all right. Well, I guess.
Well, it's interesting that you finally did get it in that form of a bottle. I didn't know that background story. Yeah. So okay. So you're going at it. You're driving the business forward now.
But really, everything is new. Everything is hard. I didn't know how to make the product. Trying to find a bottling plant. I certainly didn't know how to distribute the product. Yeah. And then raising the money, the first raise, as I said, was relatively easy because it was people who, I call it people who you could, who will invite you to Thanksgiving even if you lose their money. Sure. But there was so much that, I didn't know. And in some cases that was an advantage. So for example, I managed to get an appointment with Whole Foods here in the Mid-Atlantic with the buyer, and presented the line to him and explained why it was different. It was so much less sweetener. And he said, well, okay, I'll try it in my 17 stores, but what I'll do is you deliver it, and if it sells through, then I'll pay you for it. Yeah. Oh, and that's actually fairly standard, but I didn't know that. I said, well, I can't do that. I mean, the whole company is me in these thermoses, which technically Barry, gave to me. Yeah. And then we had an empty Snapple bottle we pasted a label on. I said, no, I really need you to pay for the first bottle. Yeah. And he said, okay, I'll do that. Which was like great that he did that, but maybe a more experienced person would have said, oh, okay, I'll do that. But I, from my point of view, it was like I certainly wasn't acting. That was like my real thing.
What did you? Okay, so just to take even one step back for 1 second, and it's more about the market and my curiosity about it. Why was sweet tea on the market anyways?
Everything was so sweet.
So how did America adopt? Did you ever do the origin of how did we adopt tea drinking and then sweet tea?
So soda was a predominant drink. Yeah. And then you remember there were drinks like Snapple that came about, and that was perceived as a healthy alternative to soda. It wasn't any healthier. It was just not carbonated.
It's just not carbonated.
And it was in a glass bottle, but I guess even soda was in a glass bottle at the time. Then you had drinks like Clearly Canadian, again, a super sweet drink made with high fructose corn syrup. It was healthier because it wasn't caramel colored. Sure. And so nobody was selling, and you didn't, bottled water was barely a thing. Yeah. So that was kind of just getting started. And so there weren't people selling drinks with like 1 or 2 teaspoons of sugar. And so if you look at the iced tea shelf, even in Whole Foods at that time, the top seller was Arizona green tea. Yeah. Then it was Snapple. Then you had drinks like Sobe, which was another super sweet drink, and then Tazo, and all. So everything was sort of at this sweetness profile. Yeah. And Honest Tea was certainly not maybe the ingredients were high quality, but the taste was very early. Yeah. And much less sweet, but it wasn't for everybody, but it definitely had a distinctive taste. Yeah. So somebody who was a Snapple drinker wasn't going to just pivot. We had to build the market. We had to get people who weren't tea drinkers or weren't bottled tea drinkers to give it a try.
Yeah.
So it was a long, slow build. It was. I mean, I look at our velocities, our sell through on the shelf with Just Iced Tea now, and man, there's no way Honest Tea would have done that.
Yeah, and let's get. I want to get to Just Iced Tea too, because I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for days about this stuff. But I guess so. One question before we move, because we'll fast forward to to hear about the Coke and then But and by the way, guys, there's so many podcasts that Seth does. So if you want to hear even more about Honest Tea, I mean, please just Google him and you'll find all that information of Honest Tea. I'm sorry. At one point, did your idea was, because it feels like it was still early age, it's still a great idea, but maybe it wasn't living up to changing the world the way you wanted. So when was there a swing of finally when you fully got organic or you got fair trade?
Well, it was a journey. We started with some organic ingredients, and by 1999, which is just a year in, we realized we had an ability to make a peppermint herbal tea that was fully organic. It was based on a recipe from a Crow Indian reservation that we had developed a relationship with. So that was really neat. And it wasn't just a relationship. We actually were paying them a royalty on the sales that went to benefit a foster care program on the reservation. And we were paying them for
some type of fair trade.
Yeah, it was but it was culturally consistent. It was we featured one of their chiefs on the label, a chief that they had recommended to use. And we on the label talked about the role peppermint played in their culture, which is actually really significant. It was part of the Sundance ritual, the peppermint leaves, and they tied peppermint leaves to the manes of their horses. It was a really, and we went to the community.
Was that your first community that you went to? That was the first time you went? Okay.
It was very, very gratifying and beautiful experience. And so that was called First Nations Peppermint. Again, the name, paid honor to somebody said, you should call it Sundance Tea. That was sort of our mindset going in. They're like, Sundance is a really solemn ritual that involves mutilation. Like, don't name a tea.
Sure. Exactly.
So that was a wonderful thing. So that was our first step. And then in 2003, we realized we learned more about the supply chain for tea, and we realized we can make both an organic and fair trade tea. And so we launched Peach Oolong, which is our first fair trade certified tea, and then that started us on that path. So
by the time you launched Peach Oolong, you had how many SKUs? You had the Moroccan.
We had Moroccan mint. We had Assam. We had what was called Kashmiri chai that eventually got discontinued. We had Black Forest Berry, which is our berry hibiscus tea.
Berry hibiscus.
We had a Gold Rush cinnamon herbal tea, which some people love, but not enough. So I've learned cinnamon is a very I guess it's polarizing. Some people love it, others don't.
We learned the hard way. We're learning with ginger right now.
So in terms of the impact, I would say what we were doing, it was very meaningful to me. It was very meaningful when I got to go to the communities we sourced from. But it was also meaningful to the consumers. Even at a small scale, we heard people who loved these teas and felt like it played a role in them getting healthier, or them feeling balanced in the day, or them just enjoying life more. So I was feeling the impact directly, even at a small scale. As we grew, we realized we could actually begin to play an even more meaningful role in these communities. And so, I think once I made the move to this, I never, to being an entrepreneur, I never had that worry again, am I too far from the impact I want to make?
Right,
and I still feel that way now. It's still, and actually the irony is, just to circle back, when I look at politics now, I see so much of it around compromise and posturing and rhetoric instead of focusing on what the impact is. So I don't have any regrets about or second thoughts maybe I should go back into the
I mean, listen, even fast forward afterwards, you're providing tea to one of the presidents of the United States, and he's making good decisions on behalf of the country. So it's really the tea that's doing it all, Seth. So what was your big Honest Tea moment where you're like, wow, we are a big brand now?
There were a lot of little moments along the way. I don't think there was any one big one, but Actually, a really fun one that we've talked about before was, just after we launched, our whole thing was always have your tea with you. You never know who you're going to run into.
Yeah.
And Barry went on a yoga retreat where it just happened to be like Oprah was on the mat next to him.
Oh, really? Of course, Barry went on a yoga retreat with Oprah.
So he had the tea. He gave it to her. And within like a week, I got a call from Harpo Studios in Chicago, where Oprah is, and said, I've got to find how I can get more of that tea that Oprah loves.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any distribution in Chicago at that time. So we literally, got a box and a bunch of padding and loaded up a bunch of tea and sent it off.
What flavor?
Boy.
You remember?
I think it was kind of a mix. I think we had the chai, but then the O Magazine, Oprah's O Magazine, put on had a full page picture of our a ginger tea that we eventually brought out, and it was like just a beautiful way for her to say, I love this tea.
Listen, once you make it in on Oprah, it's a made deal.
So there were a lot of little moments like that just continued to really elevate our visibility, and we had our marketing really was creative, and it was guerrilla. It was kind of the there was sort of this moment where media was still a thing, social media wasn't a thing. And so you would get, whether you're on the Today Show or Good Morning America. And our team was just so creative in how they found ways to get recognition. And so we became part of American culture. At least
and you got to use some of your talents too, right? The beatboxing.
Right.
We had a lot of fun.
Rap.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, we think what you drink.
You think what you drink.
So it was a fun time. And then, of course, we are just partially what made it so fun is the sales were so significant. And eventually, as you know, Coca-Cola took an interest in the business.
Yeah.
Saw that. They saw that as part of their future. And so we were on trucks and just, seeing it everywhere.
So, eventually, with a lot of grit, a lot of hard work, you're able to get acquired by Coca-Cola eventually. Yeah. Which was, I'm sure, a celebratory moment, but probably you were a little nervous as well.
It was like, wow, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe I'm talking to the chairman of Coca-Cola about
especially based on this all started with a study you did with Coca-Cola and Pepsi, right? Like that in a way that feels like, wow.
Could never have envisioned that. But someone said, did you ever dream of bringing the brand to that scale? So we did dream of it. We would, we launched it. Not that we would do it through Coca-Cola, that we just didn't know what path it would take. But it was, and of course, it's sad now. It's not with Coca-Cola, but Honest Kids is.
Yes.
And I still take pride in
there's
Honest Kids
still
out there.
Honest legacy there. Yeah.
Just doing some research on you, Seth. One of the most interesting and I thought most impactful quotes you did was the calories saved every year, especially for Honest Kids.
Yes.
Because, one of the biggest barriers for, organic and healthy eating is, the cost and getting access to the people. But, everybody goes to, restaurants, gets, kids' meals and Happy Meals. And having that juice in there, you have direct access to them. Which is huge. I have an 8-year-old and I have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, but, they grew up, having honest juice and all their Happy Meals and whatnot.
That's it.
And, it wasn't available when we were kids.
So that's that impact thing I'm talking about, and just to flesh out the numbers for listeners. So Honest Kids is a 35 calorie juice box. We replaced the Minute Maid juice box at McDonald's, which was a 70 calorie juice box. So that's a 45 calorie, 35 calorie. That's 80. I'm sorry, is a 45 calorie because the Minute Maid's 80 calories. So 45 calorie differential. And every year, going back from when we launched, they've sold over 200 million units in McDonald's of Honest Kids.
Wow.
So that's over 1 billion calories just by making that switch. And so that's and then of course, Honest Kids is in Wendy's and Chick-fil-A and Subway and all these places, and Sweet Green and Kava too. So you think about, not only are you democratizing organic, but you're also helping all these kids acclimate their taste buds to a different taste profile, right? Versus if they're just taking mindless empty calories, then that's kind of what they look for everywhere. Versus okay, I can actually enjoy a drink.
Obviously, and then and avoid any health risk, especially with diabetes being one of the largest things. And so that's it's a big impact. Thanks for
that. Social economic class is more likely to go to a fast food place than a Whole Foods.
That's a thing too. And so just as for me is exciting, the calories is great, but also that's that organic seal. It's not so foreign to me because I get it at McDonald's.
Sure.
No one goes to McDonald's saying, "Oh, I want organic food. Let's go to McDonald's."
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a great crossover product. I haven't done the analysis, but my guess is that more people have. If you look at the organic product most people have tasted, it's probably Honest Kids than any other item.
100%. It has to be.
So that's kind of a cool way to think
Seth,
about
we eat on this podcast.
I'm fired up.
Yeah, so we talk and eat at the same time.
Let's
you shove
do
your, Jay, you want to just help out? So we got the vegan pizza from We the Pizza.
Thank you.
Another one of our
It's amazing.
sponsors.
Yeah, and I didn't eat breakfast, so I'm.
Oh, there we go.
Love it. Thank you.
But it's interesting. So as we eat and take some bites, and of course the guests love hearing us munch because I think it makes them hungry, and I love that because we're promoting them buying food and we're supporting a small business somehow through the sounds of. I'm going in
go
like
straight
this.
up. Yeah.
So I do want to get into a little bit of Plant Burger as well because we've co-founded that and your experience with Beyond Meat, but just to close the loop a little bit on the honesty. How's it feel? Did you ever imagine that you were able to do this twice in one lifetime? Mm-hmm. And does it feel like you're doing it twice, or does it just feel like you're picking up of like where you left off?
Resumption, yeah.
Yeah, and just doing it again, like and has it and I know you personally, but how does it feel the second time around? What are some of the differences?
Yeah,
and where are we going with this?
Yeah. So. When we launched Eat the Change, we talked about what path we'd take, and we were asked, are you going to do beverage? I'm like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah,
beverage is it's brutal. It's a grind. It's you count beverage years and dog years, like all that. Like I don't see it going back. And I wouldn't have gone back to do this for several reasons. Number one, it is tough. But number two, I wouldn't want to compete with Honest Tea. Like Honest Tea is my vision of what a brand should be doing. And why would I want to undermine or try to compete against it? Because of course at scale, Coca-Cola's resources are always going to be hard to beat. It was only when I got that call from Coca-Cola telling me they were discontinuing Honest Tea that I had to. And as you know, like the first reaction, I couldn't even think about launching a new one. All I could just feel was sadness. Like, this vision I had that had come to fruition is now not doing what it was meant to do. And the gardens that we had developed these relationships with, they were scared and worried. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And the supply chain and the customers too. I mean,
totally.
President Obama's office calling him, get a pallet of Green Dragon tea. I'm like, I don't know. So for the first week, we had to just sort of marinate in that sadness. Yeah. But it was pretty clear after that first week, as we started getting incoming inquiries from people who wanted to see this still be out there, that Honest Tea was more than just, or what Honest Tea stood for was more than just that brand. It was bigger than that. And I actually started talking with, got approached by some companies thinking about doing it and asking for our help. I'm like, wait, if anyone's going to do this, it should be us.
Why do I need your help?
And what we were so fortunate was that we had already had an existing business. We already had, so, I didn't have to think about, well, who's going to help formulate?
Sure.
I had a partner who could do that. And who's going to sell? Well, I already got sales team.
Yeah.
We raised the money from investors. All of those things were already there.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, well, we could do this and we could do it quickly. And then of course, Barry was on board, but I said to Barry, well, what are we going to, because people have asked us, why could you buy back the rights to the name Honest Tea? We couldn't because Coca-Cola still had Honest Kids, and so that wasn't for sale. So then it's like, well, how do we ever find a name as good as Honest Tea? Like that's a once in a lifetime.
Exactly.
and because we knew if we were going to do this, we basically had to come up with a name in a weekend.
In one weekend. And Barry did it again, right? Did he? I mean, he did it again.
We brainstormed. We came up with some.
What was the runner-up?
The runner-up, I think, at least in my mind, was Integra Tea.
Yeah.
Okay. So that also spells the word integrate. That's kind of interesting. Yeah. The third runner-up, which I think was way down, was this TLC, Tea Lovers Company, which to me was like, no.
Yeah. No.
But Just Iced Tea. I got the same feeling when I heard Justice Tea or Just Iced Tea as when I first heard Honestly. Like,
Boom.
Boom. That's
Mind
it.
blown.
I remember calling you.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was like, they got it. I was like, they got the name. I love it. I shared it with my wife, Cody, and she was big time. So I'm gonna let you eat. I'm gonna talk about how we met, so people could figure out how a recovering celebrity chef.
I watched the panel you guys met on.
Oh, you did?
2017.
Washington Post, right?
Pardon?
Was the Washington Post one?
Yeah, it was the Washington. Yeah, it was.
George Washington.
George Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seth sent it to me about a year ago. I still have it in my email. I just keep it there just because it always brings a smile. Yeah. So I mean, Seth, I was involved in policy, obviously, Chef Ford, and I had known about honesty. My first honesty experience myself was. I think there was, if you remember, there were still bookshops back in the day when I was cooking in DC in 2008, and there's a bookshop right across the street from my restaurant, which I would go take a break from and just kind of hang out, and that's where I was introduced with honest tea.
What was that shop? Do you remember?
It was a. I don't want to call it Kramer's.
The Kramer Books.
Is it Kramer Books?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kramer Books. Yeah, so it was Kramer Books, and the tea was in there, and I picked it up. I was just looking for something refreshing and delicious, and I took a swig of it, and then I looked at the label, and it said, just a tad sweet, and I kind of giggled. I was like, this guy, I didn't even know Seth. I was like, this guy is so funny. I was like, this is exactly what this drink is. It's just a tad sweet. And soon enough, we made sure we were selling honesty at Good Stuff Eatery. We had it in there, and we were so and then years later, I met Seth on a panel at GW, the one that Jason just mentioned, and Seth had the entrepreneurial that he is. He brought Beyond Meat burgers,
just like Barry at Oprah's.
Yeah, just like Barry. He always had product on him, and he brought it's kind of weird. He brought the Beyond Meat burgers and honest tea. And I knew he was going to be on the panel, so I think I had brought some plant waters or something like that. It was a CB product. I was like, this is the beverage king. I was like, I got to show him what I'm up to. And I don't know if you remember this, but I had asked you. I was like, do you know anybody that could help bottle this stuff? And you had put me in touch with Brian Dworkin.
Oh, I did.
Which, and I had a brief conversation with him, maybe like, I don't know.
Oh, that's funny.
A really brief one. I was like, this guy's crazy. And in my mind, I was like, this guy is nuts. But what had impressed me the most is I had taken, and Seth didn't know this, I had taken my the Beyond Meat burgers back to my house. I had grilled them up, and I cooked them for my wife, which was vegan. Seth had no clue that my wife was vegan, and she absolutely loved them. She was gushing about them all night long. Still very early stage, like it was a very 1.0 maybe at that time, still with the Beyond Meat burgers.
Yeah.
There's some tweaks to be had, but I thought it was the first time I had eaten something that resembled like a burger. So I reached out to Seth. I chased him around for a little on email. I was like, listen, this is amazing. How can we work together? And I started getting involved a little bit with producing some content for Beyond Meat. I was able to kind of fold in. We did a couple tastings here and there. I remember I threw you a burger palooza at Good Stuff Eatery, and we just swapped the entire menu. We just put Beyond Meat burgers in there, and I thought it was pretty successful. It piqued your curiosity. And so fast forward, Seth, Seth, actually, you tell me this, because and what was the moment for you, because you were a chair still at of Beyond Meat, and then you were still holding your TEO, which I always love, by the way, TEO position at Coke.
Yeah. So
what were you like, hey, let me call up this crazy little chef kid and maybe do this plant burger thing?
Yeah. So as executive chair of Beyond Meat, I was working half-time officer of the company, so there was no way I could get directly involved.
Sure.
And then as an employee of Coca-Cola, also half-time, they have a rule that you can't have any business that competes with their customers.
Sure.
So initially I said, well, I can't play a direct role in this, but my wife, who's
absolutely.
always been a creative brain behind our businesses, would be a great person to get involved. And I remember we had lunch and we walked around Bethesda.
Yeah.
And Bethesda is such a competitive restaurant environment. I saw all these places going out of business. I'm like, man, I don't want to be one of those. I'm like paying a lease and then having to go out. Rather than do that, let me try to arrange an introduction to Whole Foods here in the Mid-Atlantic, which I obviously know those folks. And they have this program called the Friends Program that allows you to basically try out a restaurant idea without having to build the lease and all the things. And so we met with them, and we brought them to the Burger Palooza.
Yeah.
And they love the taste and the idea, and they're like, "Well, this is worth trying."
Yeah. It was actually it gave us actually the best shot of being successful right out of the gate with a concept like this, because and we won't get into the pandemic and all that stuff, because that's all it could be. Well, part 2 with Seth Goldman, learning through the pandemic. But Whole Foods, we were able to get in and open up a kiosk with 115 square feet, and we were doing gangbuster numbers out of there. And I mean, we really impressed Whole Foods, and before you know it, they were opening up so many more opportunities to open up more burger shops during COVID, during the pandemic, and I think we got to 10 or something like that, right? So how is did you take a break after you sold Coca-Cola? Honesty. Did you take a break?
At the end of 2019, or toward the end of 2019, I felt like I saw Coca-Cola not investing in Honesty.
Sure.
I'm like, they don't need me to, I don't want to be the queen of England or what. If we're going to grow this brand, I'm happy to stay around. If not, I'm ready to move on. And then Beyond Meat as well was scaling, so I didn't need to continue to be executive chair. We were now hiring people who could do, whether it's the financing work or the international work, a lot of things, strategy. So I'll shift from executive chair into chair of the board, which means I'm not an officer and I have the latitude to do new things. So by the end of 2019, I was ready to do new things. And that's when I was able to become a co-founder with Plant Burger formally. And then also launch new enterprises like Eat the Change.
And so I don't want to skip over the Beyond Meat thing, but we don't have to deep so down. But Julie read an article. Is that how Beyond Meat came?
In 2012, she was reading the business section of the Post, and there was an article about this company getting started in California that was seeking to make meat products, plant-based meat products that replicated the taste and texture using only plants. And we had been vegetarian at the time, and she said, "Boy, if we can help this company succeed, that'll be that'll serve us well and serve the world well." And that's so I literally sent an email to info@beyondmeat.com and said, "Hey, if there's any way I can help out, I'd love to."
Oh, I love that. And so, go ahead, Jay.
For people who don't know, the listeners who don't know the vegan plant industry, can you kind of give a 1-minute synopsis about Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat, and how it all flows together?
Yeah,
good one.
So at the time, this is going back to 2012, we, like many vegetarians, were happy with our decision from an ethical perspective, but always a little let down at barbecues or moments when there's a real traditional meat occasion, because the only options were more like the Boca Burger, which we used to say were bar coasters soaked in MSG, just the typical, dry patty.
Hockey pucks.
Yeah, hockey pucks, And so what Beyond Meat was trying to do was very different on taste and texture, aroma, sizzle. And simultaneously, as Beyond Meat was getting founded, there's another company, Impossible Foods, that was also getting founded that was trying to do the same thing. Theirs was a little more scientific. They had a GMO ingredient. Ours was trying to be more closer to that natural positioning. But together they built a category that didn't exist before, which was and the aspiration was to get that plant-based meat into the meat section of the store versus the freezer. Prior to Beyond Meat, all of the burger, veggie burger offerings were in the freezer. And those are great for vegetarians because they go there to seek it, but most meat eaters aren't going to look there. And so that was kind of the breakthrough. that Beyond Meat was.
So was Impossible more trying to get into restaurants and
retail,
and you were more grocery store?
That's exactly right. They started in restaurants, focus, and we started in grocery, but we both have now crossed over to.
Was there a similar kind of, and I know Ethan obviously had maybe been doing this, or was there a similar case study as in what you saw within Coke and Pepsi and the yearning for less sugar? Was there?
There's been a case study on the financing of Beyond Meat. I think together, what's the interesting story of that to me is how together these two companies created a category. That one on its own may have been harder to create a category, but by having two, and if you go to the store like the giant supermarket today, you'll see that plant-based meat section, and it's Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, and basically others have come and gone. but those are the two brands that have built the category. And by the way, gone through the ups and downs.
Sure.
And ups again now.
Yeah. So why do you exactly ups again now is important because we're feeling that at Plant Burger.
Yeah.
But what do you think was, and I've heard you talk about this a bunch, but I'm sure people would love to listen. Is why do you think there were such headwinds? Like, I mean, there was, what happened there?
There was an exuberance that came when we launched. People just couldn't believe that this was a thing, and so people jumped on it really quickly. Then the incumbent industry, or the meat industry, started to raise questions about, these ingredients are super processed or ultra processed, or it's not healthy for you. They even raised questions about the environmental impact. All of which now I can say are absurd, and I have on every aspect I'm confident that what we're offering at Beyond Meat is better than from a health, nutrition, environmental perspective. But I think in the absence of a narrative from the plant-based industry, the animal-based industry took hold, and so there was a lot of pushback. You started.
What was the most outlandish data point they were putting out there?
Oh my God! Well, this idea that you talk about ultra processed, and there is a processing, but we make the processing involved in Beyond Meat, and I'm not talking about others, is the same as the way you make pasta. It's using what's called extrusion. So you take your ingredients and you run them through, use heat and pressure.
That's right.
To just texturize them. So if you have an issue with the process of Beyond Meat, you should have an issue with
yes,
pasta.
and for those listening, I am a professional world-class chef, and I'm telling you, there's no difference right here.
Yeah.
It's an extrusion process, just how you throw eggs and flour in a bowl with a little bit of water, you mix it up, it comes out looking like pasta. That is called processing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so...
And so what you really, if you have a health concern, you should look at the nutritional panel. And what are the ingredients? What's the nutritional profile, right? So whether you're looking at cholesterol or saturated fat, all of these things are, and then of course you want protein content for sure. And then what are you not getting? And all these other byproducts of animal-based meat that you're not getting. Not to mention even just the environmental impact of animal-based meat. And I can go off on sort of the culture of cruelty associated with producing animal-based meat is a whole nother piece that certainly makes me feel much better about the choice to have Beyond Meat. And there's no question, you can lead a healthy lifestyle, and what our family and sort of the health that the people have, and it's very much a plant-based lifestyle that. Without any compromise. It's not like, there's any sort of less performance in the athletics or in sort of health profile because of that.
Who in the Goldman family has been the driving force of plant-based? Tell us a little bit about that, because Jonah's he was the second phone call after Julie's second phone call for Plant Burger, and he was in Israel at the time. I remember talking with him and telling him about our aspirations and ideas, and he had already been on top of it and then super excited and so he picked up his life and moved away from Tel Aviv at the time he was living. But tell us, what is that like having a son of yours kind of pushing the envelope?
Oh boy! Oh wait! Well, he was always pushing the envelope. So going back to when he was 8 years old, we took him on a service project for his religious school. We went to an animal sanctuary, and he just had a wonderful experience there. We were shoveling dirt, which he loves to do, but we were shoveling dirt for a chicken coop. And so not only was he shoveling dirt, which is his wheelhouse.
His pastime, for sure. I can affirm.
But he got to interact with this rooster named George, who just had such a personality. It was a very bossy rooster, and he would sort of order people around. And then it just so happened that night we used to love this Peruvian chicken place. And I walked in to pick up the chickens, and all the chickens are on a spit, over fire. Yeah. And Jonas, as we're driving away, sort of says, well, what's the difference between George and those chickens on the spit? I said, well, there's not that much difference. I mean, George is alive and they're not. And then he, so at that age, he first said, well, I think I'm gonna be a vegetarian. And we're like, oh, okay, that was pretty new.
Yeah.
And then it was hamburger night one night. He couldn't resist. He went back.
Yeah, you went back to it.
But he thought more about it. By the time he became 10, he's like, I'm going to be vegetarian. And he basically did it. We supported him, but we didn't join him.
Yeah.
And then he convinced his brothers to join them. And it's funny, Julie and I still didn't join. But by the time he was 13, he was in middle school. And I think it was probably a little hard being a middle schooler with that worldview. And,
Sure.
Kids make fun of you for that, oh, look at my chicken bowl, so delicious, right?
Yeah.
And so we thought, well, this would be a nice way to support him, would be to also become vegetarian. Yeah. So our whole family by that time became vegetarian. This was now 18 years ago. And we started to feel sort of better about the choices we were making. And by the time we got to 2020, was when our second son, Ellie, said, I think he had seen that movie Game Changers.
Yes.
Which Plant Burger, we had a viewing of it.
We had a viewing with it. And I listened to many podcasts about
how high performance athletes can be plant-based. So Ellie's like, I'm going to try being vegan.
Yeah.
And so then in 2020, as a family, we all went vegan. And it is stuck as well. And it turns out, which we didn't know obviously at the time, but that was the perfect time to become vegan because it was right before the pandemic. And, the pandemic was a moment where the whole world felt out of balance. And not that, we weren't disturbed by the pandemic, we were, but at least one part of our life we felt sort of in balance with nature. And we were able to produce a delicious burger spot. Well, that was the thing. Then,
right? Like we were...
More. It was even for selfish reasons. All of a sudden now we had a place, not just where we could feel like, it's as good as this was better tasting burgers, fries, shakes, all these things.
Yeah, these were greasy, indulgent foods that, because of innovation and because of people like yourself and creativity, and we were able to produce things that are just as good.
Yeah.
And you guys were in a grocery store, which was like an essential.
That was the other thing.
That was big for us.
We couldn't have foreseen that, but watching all these restaurants have to close because they couldn't open was like,
we kept on talking to each other a little bit. It was slightly not embarrassing, but we felt a little bit like it was kind of every couple weeks we were announcing an opening at Whole Foods, and people were like, "We're losing our restaurants," and so it was a fine line of like, "Wow, we're doing it." Yeah. But it was also, for me, it was like, wow, like look at the carnage that's happening in the industry. And Whole Foods had closed their hot foods buffet areas, right? So, they were
losing money too, and for us, there was a chance for them to bring people in.
What are some of your hopes for Plant Burger?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, as you know, we've been through a challenge with Plant Burger, getting it to scale, getting it to profitability. Now we've done that, which is a huge breakthrough. And here we are this week where we just heard about Hard House closing, a West Coast chain. And it just shows like you gotta whether you're operations or whether you have a celebrity or not, like you got to have a solid operation. You have to have good margins. You got to make the business make sense. And now we've done that for Plant Burger. So now it feels like we're ready to scale this thing.
Yeah, and you have to have good, consistent product as well.
That's right.
We wouldn't be able to be doing this without Beyond Meat, without the discovery,
with the menu delivering being satisfying. So now I see us really scaling this thing, and so we are going to launch a crowdfunding campaign, which we're excited about. That'll be a great way to bring in. We talk about democratizing our food, but this will be the first time, at least for me, I've been involved in democratizing the business in terms of ownership.
Yeah.
And that'll be really exciting to have, even if it's, a few $100s, letting someone feel like they're part of this growing enterprise and have a small stake in its success. So that'll be fun. And we've got an opening next month in Coolidge Corner.
That's right. We got back in your home, your stomping grounds.
Yeah,
stomping grounds.
That'll be really fun to see that.
And for those of you, you can find that crowdfunding on Start Engine. Mm-hmm. And like Seth said, it's a good moment to be part of what we believe is the future of fast food to a certain degree, right? And we're gonna take you for a ride and have a lot of fun. So make sure you start look at that website. But Seth, I think we have a few more minutes left here, and just to round it out, let's lean into Just Iced Tea.
Yes.
Let's lean into Just Iced Tea. Tell me, first of all, run me through our best selling tea real quick. Tell people what makes up this tea.
Yeah.
Here it is on the thing, and tell if you can share with them about all the things that we're doing in Mozambique would be great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So this has been thrilling. You had asked earlier how does this feel compared? This has been so joyful. I mean, Honest Tea in retrospect, it was joyful, but along the way, it was a lot of stress
Sure, of
and
course.
challenge. This one, of course, we have moments of stress and challenge, but for the most part, this has just been joyful to put out this product that we so believe in, that people love, and to feel that embrace from the consumer, and the emails we get or the interactions we have in stores. It's just been so gratifying. And so, what we're doing, it is the bottle. What's in the bottle are the values we're promoting. So the organic means that there's no chemical pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, or artificial ingredients involved in the production of those things, of anything in the bottle. And that really helps support the ecosystems that we source from, but it also helps support the consumers who drink the product, because when you ingest the chemicals in those products, obviously we know their residues build up in our bodies. They also build up in the ecosystem.
Seth, tell them about how the brewing of tea and why that is
right.
why that
Right.
point is so important. You
Yeah.
guys have to listen to this, because this one's mind blowing.
Yeah. So unlike an apple or a tomato, where if there's chemicals, that are exposed, if a crop is exposed to chemicals in the growing process, if you take them home, you can rinse off a lot of those chemicals. But with tea leaves, the tea leaves are never rinsed. They're picked and they're dried right away. The only time that those chemicals are rinsed off is when you pour hot water on the leaves to make the tea. And so that's what would end up in your drink. And so when we choose organic, there's no chemical sprayed on the leaves. And as a result, when you put them in water, nothing's washed off. You're just brewing tea. So that's a really great place to be. But then on top of that is the fair trade element, which means that all the gardens we source from, all of the workers are being paid a living wage. But they're also a portion, it's roughly 10% of our purchase price, goes back to the workers in a fund that they can use to invest in their community or invest in their future. So in Mozambique, where we source, there's the very basic need of access to clean drinking water, which is, anyone looks in the developing world, is a fundamental need. You can't really do anything else if you don't have access to water. But once you have access to water, then you can start thinking about education for children, so investing in schools. And then the ongoing need to make sure that healthcare is available. And so what we're launching in just this fall is a campaign to raise money for a health clinic in Mozambique. And we're raising, obviously, our own money, and we whether it's winning a cooking competition or or we have some partners who are investing with us. We're also taking all of the fair trade proceeds from our purchases to invest in building a health clinic. We're also raising money with Rotary International so they can match our contributions, and we hope to open up that health clinic early next year. So we're really excited about that. But then also our sweeteners, whether it's agave or sugar or honey, they're all, again, organic and fair trade sourced. So all of those things go into this bottle, which again is lower calories. So again, we're trying to help people shift towards healthier diets, and we're entirely, no calorie. We have two, soon to be three, 0-calorie offerings that are that have a very fierce and loyal following, and so it's great to have those too.
And so, Seth, I mean, we're going to round it out here because Seth and I have a ton of calls for the rest of the guys. We got to get tea to the market. Where can they? And I have a couple fun questions too, but first tell them, where can they find our tea right now?
Sure. So one of the neat things, we just marked it this week, is that Honest Just Iced Tea is about the same size as Honest Tea was 10 years into the business, and we're just now hitting our 2-year anniversary with
big time
Just Iced Tea. So we're doing this one fast, which is great, and makes it better for us to get this to more places. So we are in nationally in Whole Foods, nationally in Sprouts, but we're also in more local chains like Giant of Maryland or Stop and Shop. We are also seeing some new expansion in a lot of independent natural food stores. And we're right now in this window where chains are looking at us for expansion. We are in Safeway Mid-Atlantic, and we think there's an opportunity to expand there. So over the next few weeks, we're going to expect to see our brand really become nationally distributed.
Big moves, guys.
Yeah.
You heard it from the man himself, Seth Goldman. Seth, tell me a couple things. Have you found a replacement for Duncan Hines spice cake yet?
So that was my go-to birthday cake. I still enjoy a good cake out of a box recipe, but my wife will not tolerate that, and she has a great vegan recipe for spice cake that we were able to have for my birthday. So I don't suffer for not having that.
Okay. And then, want to give a big congrats to Jonah and the entire Goldman family.
Yeah.
You have a brand new first grandchild.
Amazing experience.
Her name's Rose Merle Goldman, named after your mother.
Yeah. I literally, when I found out her name, so my grandmother's name was Rose, my mom's name was Merle. And when we walked in to see her for the first time, I was just overcome, and just seeing her was amazing. But then when I learned her name, I couldn't stand. It was just so overpowering.
Yeah,
it was really wild.
Well, love that. And then Seth, just another little fast one. If you had to choose either to exercise or sleep for the day, which one was it?
Exercise.
All day.
You get that energy from exercising.
Yeah.
And obviously everybody needs sleep at some level, but you sleep better when you exercise. So
yeah. And I'll tell you guys, listen, Seth will get you on a basketball court and a pickleball court. Don't let him fool you. Volleyball, he's very competitive. The Goldman family is a very competitive family, and I enjoy. Sometimes I win some, but not a lot of lose. We
enjoy the competition. It's always fun to win, but don't let the outcome taint the enjoyment.
Yeah. And Seth, it sounds like you're still doing all the things you were doing as a kid. You're getting out there. You're doing sports, the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You got your, you're into so many things. For me personally, I'm so proud to be your co-founder on not one, but two.
Yeah.
We're having a great ride, and I feel like we're just getting started in some degree.
Well, I always appreciate Spike. We even saw it last night at the Nationals. Like I'm able to sort of be present and everything, but when you walk in, it's whether it's to a tea garden or to a baseball suite, like you always bring that extra spark of fun.
That means a lot.
Yeah, it's great. I think we've been great partners.
Absolutely.
And, complementary in a lot of ways.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And
it's picking up. Yeah.
Our social media is picking up, right? I told you it's happening. All right, guys. Well, listen, the last thing, guys, go support Just Iced Tea. We're in about 6,000 stores. Maybe by the end of the year, we'll be in 10,000, anywhere in Whole Foods, and while you're maybe in one of the Whole Foods, look for a plant burger. We have 10 locations. Yeah. We're in Philly a little bit, Boston. Here in the local area, we're in Tysonsboro, Alexandria. Where else? Silver Spring was our first one. And then again, like if DC. If you have a little curiosity, you don't have to be a vegan or vegetarian. Pick up some of those Beyond Meat burgers, man. Cook them yourselves, test them out, and see what they're all about. It definitely changed the way I look at plant-based meat, and I'm sure it'll do the same for you. And with that, guys, we are out. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this captivating episode of In the Weeds with our guest, Seth Goldman, the Doc Brown of veggie proteins, the ETH Goldman R. You can learn more about his latest initiatives at justiced.com, and Tony's Chocolonis. We didn't talk about it, but go check them out, tonychocolonis.com. A special shout out to our fantastic sponsors, Just Iced Tea and We The Pizza. Discover the refreshing taste of Just Iced Tea at eatthechange.com and satisfy your pizza cravings with the pizza at wethepizza.com. You won't regret it. And a huge thank you to our broadcast home, DC Central Kitchen, for their unwavering support. They're not just serving up food, they're serving up real change. Learn more and get involved at dccentralkitchen.org. To catch up on past episodes or to subscribe to future ones, head over to intheweedspod.com, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. The kitchen may be closed for now, but the conversation never stops. Nice. We are 86 for now. Until next time.
Nice.